Me, Eugene, just a regular guy, late 20s, working as a senior dev at a mid-sized tech company. It was a pretty good gig, pay was decent, work was challenging enough to not be boring. Our team was solid, like a well-oiled machine. We had a few other guys and a couple of women. Everyone got along. The rule was simple. If you were good at your job, you were respected. No office politics, no drama, just code, coffee, and deadlines. Our old team lead was a guy named Mark, straight shooter. Been in the industry for 20 years. He didn't care about anything except the quality of the final product. If your code was clean and it worked, he'd leave you alone if it was a mess. He'd tell you it was a mess and expect you to fix it fair system. Everyone was happy with it. I was kind of the unofficial problem solver on the team. Whenever there was some legacy code nobody wanted to touch, or a bug that seemed impossible to replicate, it usually ended up on my desk. I didn't mind. I kind of enjoyed the challenge, like solving a puzzle. The other devs respected it. They knew I could get them out of a jam. It was a good work environment, one of those rare places where you didn't dread. Monday mornings then, sometime last spring, Mark announced his retirement, said he was going to buy a boat and fish until he forgot what a recursive function was. We all wished him well, had a farewell party, the usual stuff for a few weeks. We were in limbo, waiting for management to announce his replacement. We all kind of hoped they'd promote one of us from within. Made sense, we knew the systems, we knew the team, but corporate has its own logic. I guess one morning, the director calls a mandatory team meeting. He introduces us to our new team lead, Dana, first impression. Very corporate, very polished. She had that super enthusiastic smile that never quite reaches the eyes. She starts her intro speech, and it's just a waterfall of buzzwords: synergy, paradigm shift, agile transformation, empowerment. My brain just kind of shut off and went into screensaver mode. But then she started talking about the team culture, said she was excited to foster a more inclusive and equitable environment, how she wanted to dismantle the traditional patriarchal structures often found in tech. A couple of us exchanged confused glances. We didn't have any patriarchal structures. We just had work. She then made a point of going around the room and having the women introduce themselves again. One of them was Amina. Amina had been with us for about a year. She wasn't a bad developer, but she wasn't a great one either. She did what was asked, kept her head down, met her deadlines, but never really went above and beyond just a solid, average B- employee. Dana immediately latches onto her, talking about how important it is to amplify female voices in the tech space. It was all very weird and uncomfortable. The meeting ends, and we all shuffle back to our desks. In silence, the vibe in the office had changed instantly. It was like a cold front had moved in the first couple of weeks. We're just strange. Dana didn't seem to care much about the actual work. She was obsessed with process, meetings, and optics. We had more meetings in her first month than we had in the previous year, with Mark meetings about communication strategies, emotional safety protocols, unconscious bias workshops. In one of these, she talked at length about toxic masculinity in the workplace, how things like mansplaining and talking over people created a hostile environment for women. She kept looking pointedly at the male members of the team as she said this. The funny thing was, our team never had that problem. If anything, we were all pretty quiet introverts who just wanted to code. The most talkative person in any meeting was now Dana herself. The first real red flag came with a new feature request from marketing. It was a pretty straightforward task. Connecting a new API to our front-end. Mark would have given it to whoever had the bandwidth. Dana made a big show of assigning it to Amina. She announced it in the team chat, saying she was thrilled to give Amina the opportunity to take the lead on this high-visibility project. Amina looked a little panicked, but she took it 2 days later. I get a private message from Amina. "Hey Eugene, got a minute? I'm stuck on this API authentication." "Sure, no problem." I hop on a call with her and walk her through it. It was a tricky bit with the OAuth tokens that our documentation didn't explain. Well, it took me about 30 minutes to show her how to handle the token. Refresh logic, she was super grateful. "Oh my gosh, thank you, you're a lifesaver. I was staring at this for hours." I just told her no worries, glad I could help. I didn't think anything of it. That's what teammates do, they help each other fast forward to the end of week review. Meeting Dana asks for an update on the marketing feature. Amina proudly announces that it's complete and ready for QA testing. Dana puts on this huge theatrical smile. She starts praising Amina to the high heavens, talking about her incredible problem-solving skills and tenacity in the face of a complex challenge. She says, and I quote, "This is a perfect example of what happens when we empower women to lead. Amina tackled a complex authentication issue all on her own and delivered a flawless solution. Let's all give her a round of applause." The room is dead silent for a second before a few people start clapping, awkwardly. Amina is just blushing and smiling, soaking it all in. She never once looks in my direction. I'm just sitting there, staring at the screen, feeling this cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't about wanting the credit. I didn't care about that. It was the blatant dishonesty of it all. Dana had manufactured this entire narrative of female triumph, and Amina just went right along with it. From that day on, the pattern was set. Any interesting or important project was immediately assigned to Amina or one of the other two women on the team. The guys, especially me, were relegated to bug fixes and minor maintenance tasks. It was grunt work, stuff you'd give to an intern, but the work still had to get done. And whenever Amina got stuck, which was often, my private messages would light up. "Hey Eugene, sorry to bother you again, but..." And like an idiot, I kept helping. Part of it was just my nature. I hate seeing a technical problem go unsolved. Another part was that I knew if the project failed, it would reflect on the whole team, not just her, so I'd help. She'd take the credit, and Dana would praise her in the next meeting. It became a running joke between me and the other guys. On the team, we'd talk about it over lunch, quietly, so no one could overhear how my official job title was senior developer, but my unofficial title was Amina's ghost coder. The atmosphere in the office got progressively worse. Dana implemented this open feedback policy where everyone was encouraged to share their feelings in a group setting, but it was a trap. If a man voiced a concern, it was framed as him being defensive or resistant to change. If a woman voiced the exact same concern, it was praised as brave and constructive. She had this way of twisting everything through her ideological lens. One time, a junior dev, a young guy named Kevin, pointed out a potential flaw in a plan Dana had proposed. He was very polite about it, just raised a valid technical point. Dana stopped the meeting and gave him a 10-minute lecture on how the tone of his feedback was aggressive. She said he needed to be more mindful of how he communicated with female leadership. Kevin was so embarrassed he barely spoke in a meeting for the next month. Meanwhile, Amina could do no wrong. She once accidentally pushed a piece of code that brought down our staging server for half a day. A pretty big screw-up. Mark would have had a stern talk with her about proper testing protocols. Dana's reaction? She sent a team-wide email about how mistakes are learning opportunities, and praised Amina's courage to experiment and push boundaries. It was like living in an alternate reality where competence didn't matter. All that mattered was which boxes you ticked on. The diversity checklist, my motivation to work, just plummeted. I stopped caring, stopped going the extra mile. I'd do the boring maintenance tickets assigned to me, do them perfectly, and then just browse the internet for the rest of the day. I was getting paid the same, so why kill myself doing real work just to have someone else get the credit for it? The other guys on the team felt the same way. Productivity for the male half of the team dropped like a rock, but Dana didn't seem to notice or care. As long as her chosen star, Amina, looked good, that's all that mattered. I started updating my resume, passively looking at other job openings. I wasn't in a hurry to leave, but I knew this situation wasn't sustainable. The breaking point was closer than I thought. Sometime in the fall, maybe October, the company announced its biggest initiative of the year. We called it the Omega Project. It was a complete overhaul of our main product's back-end architecture, a massive undertaking that had been planned for years. The CEO himself said that the future of the company was riding on its success. The director called a departmental all-hands meeting to kick it off. He stressed how critical this project was. Deadlines were tight, expectations were sky-high, and there was absolutely no room for error. Failure was not an option. When he was done, he handed the meeting over to Dana to outline the team's role and delegate the initial tasks. This was it, the most important project in the company's recent history. Everyone in the room knew who the most critical part of the project should go. To the core logic, the central processing engine was the heart of the entire system. It required deep knowledge of our existing infrastructure, a high level of skill, and meticulous attention to detail. Everyone was looking at me. I was the one who had written half of the old system we were replacing. I knew all its quirks, all its hidden traps. It was just logical that I would lead the development of its replacement. Dana stood at the front of the room, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. She pulled up a slide with the project's modules broken down. Module A, Module B, Module C. And then the core engine. She went through the smaller modules first, assigning them to various team members. I got assigned some minor database migration, script. It was a task you could give to a fresh college graduate. I didn't say anything, just nodded and wrote it down. Then she got to the core engine. The whole room was quiet. You could feel the tension. Dana paused for dramatic effect, then smiled brightly. And for the most critical piece, the core engine, I'm entrusting this responsibility to Amina. A few people audibly gasped. I just stared at her, completely numb. It wasn't just unfair anymore. This was sabotage. This was like asking a student driver to pilot a 747. She was putting the entire project, and by extension the company, at risk. Just to prove her ideological point, Dana continued, I know this will be a challenge, but I have the utmost confidence in Amina's ability to rise to the occasion. It's time we gave women the chance to lead these technically demanding projects. Amina looked terrified, but she was trying her best to hide it, putting on a brave face. One of the other senior guys on the team, Dave, actually spoke up. He said, Dana, with all due respect, Eugene has the most experience with this part of the system. Wouldn't it make more sense for him to at least co-lead that module? Dana's smile vanished. Her eyes went cold. She looked at Dave and said, Thank you for your input, Dave, but I believe it's important to disrupt the status quo. Amina has my full support, and that's final. That was it. The decision was made. We spent the rest of the meeting going over timelines, but I didn't hear a word. My mind was already somewhere else. I was thinking about all the late nights, all the weekends I'd given to this company, all the times I'd dropped everything to fix a critical bug, all the times I'd mentored junior developers and helped my teammates. All of it. For what? To be sidelined for some mediocre developer so a manager could feel good about her progressive leadership style? I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was just clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. The meeting ended, and as everyone was filing out, Dana pulled me aside. She probably sensed my mood. She gave me this condescendingly sweet smile and said, Eugene, I know you might be disappointed, but I need you to be a team player on this. It's really important that you support Amina and help her succeed. We're all in this together. I just looked at her, held her gaze for a few seconds, and for the first time in months, I was completely honest. Don't worry, Dana. You'll get all the support from me that you deserve. I turned and walked back to my desk, leaving her standing there with a confused look on her face. The plan was already forming in my mind. The next few weeks were a slow-motion train wreck. Work began on Project Omega, and it was clear from day one that Amina was in way over her head. The core engine was a beast, far more complex than anything she had ever worked on. Her progress was painfully slow. The rest of us were finishing our smaller modules, and she had barely laid the foundation for hers, and, right on schedule, the private messages started. Eugene, I can't get the data model to work. Eugene, do you have a sec to look at this algorithm? It's not scaling right. Eugene, I'm getting a weird memory leak. I don't understand why. But this time, something was different. My response was always the same. Sorry, Amina, I'm swamped with my own tasks. You should ask Dana. She's the team lead. Or, that sounds tough. Maybe you can set up a brainstorming session with Dana to figure it out. After the third or fourth time, I politely refused to help. She stopped asking. I could feel her panicked energy from across the room. She started working late, looking more and more stressed every day. Dana, for her part, was a master of reality distortion in our daily stand-up meetings. Amina would give a vague, evasive update. I'm continuing to make progress on the core logic, refining the architecture. And Dana would jump in immediately. Excellent work, Amina. I'm so impressed with your methodical approach. It's better to be thorough than to rush. Keep up the great work. She was creating a protective bubble of praise around Amina, shielding her from any real scrutiny. But the code doesn't lie. We were all using the same version control system. We could see the commits, we could see the code she was writing, and it was a disaster. It was inefficient, poorly structured, and full of rookie mistakes. The other senior guys and I would sometimes look at it and just shake our heads. It was a ticking time bomb. Anyone with a decade of experience could see that this code would never hold up under real-world load, but nobody said anything. Why would we? Dana had made it crystal clear that our opinions were not welcome. She wanted us to support Amina, and in her mind, support meant shutting up and letting her chosen one succeed or fail on her own terms. So we shut up, we did our assigned tasks, collected our paychecks, and watched the disaster unfold. I was actively interviewing at this point, had a couple of promising leads. I knew I was on my way out. It was just a matter of when the moment that sealed it, the final nail in the coffin, happened about a month into the project. I was working on my database migration script, a simple but tedious task, while running some tests. I noticed a fundamental flaw in the way Amina's core engine was interacting with the database. It wasn't just inefficient, it was structurally wrong. She was making a call that would create a massive locking issue on one of our main tables during low-traffic testing. It would probably be fine, but the moment we went live and thousands of users hit the system at once, it would grind the entire database to a halt. The whole application would freeze. It was a catastrophic showstopper bug, hidden in plain sight. My first instinct, the old me's instinct, was to immediately go to her and point it out. But then I stopped what would happen if I did. Best case scenario. She fixes it, I get no credit, and the project moves on worst case scenario. Dana accuses me of trying to undermine Amina again and creates more drama. I had a third option. I wrote up a detailed, professional, and completely neutral analysis of the issue. I included code snippets, performance benchmarks, and a projection of the server load at which the system would fail. It was undeniable proof of a critical flaw. I didn't offer a solution. I just stated the problem, backed up by data. I then requested a meeting with Dana to discuss a potential architectural risk. I didn't mention Amina or her module in the email. She accepted the meeting the next afternoon. I walked into her office, laptop in hand. I was calm, professional, and detached. I presented my findings, showing her the data, explaining the technical implications. I didn't use any accusatory language. I just laid out the facts. The current implementation will cause a cascading failure when the concurrent user count exceeds approximately 500. This will result in a total service outage. She listened, her brow furrowed. I could see she didn't fully understand the technical details, but she understood the words total service outage. When I was done, she was silent for a long time. I thought, maybe, just maybe, her pragmatism as a manager would override her ideology. I was wrong. She looked up at me, and her expression wasn't one of concern for the project. It was one of pure, unadulterated suspicion. She saw my analysis not as a warning, but as an attack on her decisions, on her chosen protege. And then she decided to make it a public execution. She told me to wait in the conference room. A few minutes later, she walks in, followed by the entire team. It was an ambush. She had a projector set up, displaying the architecture diagram. She starts the meeting with this fake, cheerful tone. Team, I wanted to create a space for open dialogue. Eugene has brought up some concerns about the core engine's database interaction, and I thought it would be a valuable learning experience for us to discuss it as a group. She then turns to Amina. Amina, why don't you walk us through your design philosophy here? Explain to the team why you chose this implementation. Amina stood up, looking like a deer in the headlights. She started trying to explain her code, but she was just reciting technical jargon without any real understanding. It was obvious to everyone who knew what they were looking at that she was completely lost. She was just stringing words together. Asynchronous processing, non-blocking I/O, optimistic locking. It was a word salad that had nothing to do with the actual problem. When she finally trailed off into an awkward silence, Dana jumped into translate. She didn't talk about the code. She talked about me. She said, what we're seeing here is a clash of two different development philosophies. Eugene comes from a more traditional, rigid school of thought. What Amina has designed is a more dynamic, forward-thinking solution. It's about being flexible and agile. It was complete nonsense. The problem I found had nothing to do with philosophy. It was a simple, mathematical certainty that the database would lock up. It was like arguing about the philosophy of gravity, I tried to interject. to bring the conversation back to the actual data. Dana, this isn't about philosophy. It's about table locks. The logs show... She cut me off instantly. She held up her hand and gave me this incredibly patronizing smile. Eugene, I understand that it can be difficult to see new approaches when you're used to doing things a certain way. But what Amina and I are trying to build here is a collaborative environment, not a competitive one, where men feel the need to poke holes in women's work. The room went completely silent. She had just turned a critical technical issue into a gender war. I just sat there, looking at her. As she sealed her own fate, I decided to give her one last chance to be a manager instead of an activist. I spoke very slowly and very clearly. The system will fail. The data proves it. This has nothing to do with gender. It's about preventing a catastrophic failure that will impact the entire company. That's when she delivered the final blow. She looked me dead in the eye, her voice dripping with condescension, and said it in front of the entire team. Thank you for your opinion, Eugene, but I think Amina and I are perfectly capable of handling this. We don't need a man to explain to us how to do our jobs. That was it. That was the moment everything snapped into perfect crystalline focus. The last 10% of me that still cared about this job, this project, this team, it just evaporated. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her, then looked around at the faces of my teammates. They were all staring at the floor, mortified. Even Amina looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. I slowly closed my laptop. I stood up, pushed my chair in neatly under the table. I looked back at Dana, gave a single, slow nod, and said nothing. Then I turned and walked out of the conference room without another word. I walked back to my desk. And the rest of the afternoon was a quiet ritual. I went through my assigned tickets for the database migration and closed them out. I wrote detailed documentation for the work I had completed. I pushed my final, clean, perfectly commented code to the repository. I deleted all my personal files and browser bookmarks from the company computer. I organized the files on my desktop into neat little folders. I was a machine, methodically detaching myself from the past few years of my life. My teammates kept their distance, occasionally glancing over at me with looks of pity or concern. Nobody spoke to me. Dana and Amina didn't come out of the conference room for the rest of the day at exactly 5 o'clock. I logged out of my computer for the last time. I packed my personal belongings into my backpack, a coffee mug, a couple of books, a framed photo. I took my employee badge off its lanyard and placed it squarely in the middle of my keyboard. Then I stood up and walked towards the exit. I didn't look back. I drove home in complete silence, the radio off. I didn't feel angry or sad. I just felt empty, like I had been carrying a heavy weight for months and had finally just set it down. I got home, sat down at my personal computer, and opened up my email. I drafted a very short, very simple message. I addressed it to Dana. I CC'd her boss, the director, and the general HR inbox. The subject line was, Resignation, Eugene, my last name. The body of the email was 2 sentences long. Please accept this email as notification that I am resigning from my position as senior developer, effective immediately. I wish you and the company all the best in your future endeavors. I hit send. Then I went into my phone and blocked Dana's number and the numbers of a few other key people from the office. I logged out of the company Slack and email on my phone, a complete and total severance. I ordered a pizza, opened a beer, and put on a movie. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, my phone was buzzing with texts from former coworkers. Dude, are you okay? Heard what happened? That was insane. Dana is telling everyone you couldn't handle the pressure. I replied to a couple of them, just saying I was fine and had decided to move on. I ignored the rest. Dana's version of the story didn't matter. The truth had a deadline, and that deadline was Project Omega's launch day. I spent the next week just decompressing. I also sent out my resume to a few companies that I had been looking at. I got a call back from one of them, a major competitor. The very next day, they were very eager to talk to me. My first round interview was scheduled for the day after Project Omega was set to go live. It felt like poetry, and then came launch day. I knew the exact time the deployment was scheduled. I wasn't watching the company's website. I didn't have to. I just knew around 3 p.m. that afternoon. I got a text from Dave, my old buddy from the team. It's happening. A few minutes later, another one, the site is slowing down. Support tickets are starting to flood in. Then, another, database CPU is at 100%. Everything is timing out. And finally, the text I had been waiting for. It's down. The whole thing is down. Total outage. I just sat there, looking at my phone. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The satisfaction of a mathematician whose equation has just been proven correct. The chaos on the other side, however, was something I only heard about later, in glorious detail. Dave told me the whole story a week later. Over beers, he said, when the system first went down, Dana was in complete denial. She kept telling everyone it was probably just a temporary network issue, or a problem with the cloud provider. She had Amina frantically looking through the code, trying to find the problem. Amina was apparently on the verge of tears, just randomly changing lines of code and redeploying, which only made things worse. The director, a man who only cared about results, stormed onto the floor. He wasn't yelling, which Dave said was way scarier. He was speaking in a low, controlled, icy voice. Why is my entire platform offline on the biggest launch day of the year? Dana tried to feed him her corporate buzzword lines. We're experiencing some unexpected performance bottlenecks, but we're leveraging our agile methodologies to iterate on a solution. The director just cut her off. Where is Eugene? Dave said the whole team froze. Dana's face went pale. She stammered, Eugene is no longer with the company. The director just stared at her. He's no longer with the company? Our best developer quit the day before the biggest launch in our history, and nobody thought to mention this to me. He then turned to the rest of the team. What happened? Nobody said anything for a second. Then Dave, bless his heart, decided he had nothing left to lose. He said, Eugene found a critical bug in the core engine a week ago. He presented it to Dana, and she humiliated him in a team meeting for it, so he quit. The director's eyes narrowed. He looked from Dave to Dana, whose face was now ashen. Show me the bug report. Show me the meeting notes. Of course, Dana hadn't documented any of it, but my email to her, the one where I requested the meeting, still existed, and the other teammates, now that the dam of fear had broken, started speaking up. They told the director everything about the public humiliation, the condescending insult, the months of favoritism, the way she had ignored all technical advice from the male members of the team. It all came pouring out. The director listened to all of it without saying a word. His expression getting darker and darker when they were done, he pointed at Dana and Amina. My office now. He then turned to the rest of the team. Get on the phone with every emergency contracting firm you can find. I don't care what it costs. Get this system back online. The story of what happened in his office became a company legend. The director had HR on a video call. He had them pull up my original email, the code commits, and the project timeline. The evidence was overwhelming. He showed that Amina's module was months behind schedule and that Dana had concealed it. He showed that I had identified the exact point of failure and had been ignored and insulted for it. Dana apparently tried to defend herself by talking about her mandate to empower women and change the culture. The director was not impressed. He told her, your job is to deliver a functional product, not to run a social experiment. Your experiment has just cost this company millions of dollars in lost revenue and emergency repair costs. You have failed, spectacularly. She was fired on the spot, told to pack her personal items and be escorted out of the building by security. Amina wasn't fired, but she was demoted back to a junior-level position and reassigned to a different department, doing low-level maintenance on a legacy product. Her days of being the star protege were over. By the time I was sitting in my second-round interview at the new company, the news had spread. The hiring manager, who used to work at my old company years ago, already knew most of the story. He just shook his head and said, their loss is our gain. They made me an offer that afternoon, a significant pay raise, a better title, and a lead position on their most interesting new project. I accepted without hesitation. I've been at the new job for a few months now. It's like night and day. My boss is a no-nonsense guy who cares about one thing, good code. My ideas are listened to, my experience is valued, and I'm judged on the quality of my work, not my gender. It's amazing how much better you can perform when you're not constantly navigating an ideological minefield. Sometimes I think back on the whole mess with Dana. I don't feel anger towards her anymore. I just feel a kind of pity. She was so blinded by her ideology that she couldn't see the reality right in front of her. She thought she was fighting a noble battle against the patriarchy. But all she did was punish a good employee, promote an incompetent one, and destroy her own career in the process. The irony is, she proved my point better than I ever could have. I just wanted to do my job and be respected for my skills, when that was taken away. I walked, and in the end, that was the most powerful move I could have made.